This envelope changed everything. My mother slid it across the white linen tablecloth like it was a birthday card, her diamond ring catching the light at exactly the right angle. My sister already had her phone angled just right, pretending this was some sentimental moment worth sharing. The restaurant got weirdly quiet. Even the string quartet behind us hesitated between notes. Inside that envelope there was no cash, no card, no sappy letter. It was a formal document. A disownment letter. Signed by both my parents and my sister. Their graduation gift to me. I folded it in half. Then in half again. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and that was it. No screaming, no scene, no tears. Just me, the letter, and a silence so heavy it felt like its own language. They truly believed they'd just written my ending. They had no idea they'd actually started their own. My name is Anna Rose Hale, and in my family, love always came with a scoreboard. My father, Richard, treated affection like a quarterly report. Wins, losses, ROI. My mother, Lillian, loved things that photographed well. Table settings, dresses, charity events, perfect daughters. My older sister, Brooke, landed right in the sweet spot between their worlds, which meant she could do no wrong. At dinners, my parents always introduced her first. Brooke just made senior associate at the firm in New York, my mother would beam, one proud hand on her shoulder. Then she'd turn to me, tone dropping half a level. And this is Anna Rose. She's still studying. Always that same little pause. That same polite smile. That same feeling like I was a half-finished draft in a house obsessed with final versions. People would nod, give me a quick, "Oh, that's nice," then drift right back to asking Brooke about promotions and partners and Manhattan rents. Our dining room always smelled like wood polish and pressure. The chandelier tossed broken light across the table, scattering little halos across the glassware. While my father talked about market volatility and my mother rehearsed her gratitude to donors who liked their charity visible, I would quietly trace those reflections with my eyes and stop trying to speak. Brooke thrived in that setting. She knew exactly when to laugh, when to tilt her head, when to ask a calculated question that made adults feel important. I watched her like you watch a perfectly tuned machine. I, on the other hand, spent my nights steaming milk and wiping counters at a cafe near campus. The espresso machine hissed louder than my father ever did. Customers didn't care about my last name. They only cared if their drink was hot and spelled right. I liked the honesty of that. No performance, just inputs and outputs. Clear variables. One Sunday after a long double shift, I walked into the kitchen and found Brooke at the counter with her laptop open, my father pouring red wine. "We were just talking about you," he said, swirling his glass. "Brooke thinks you're wasting your time behind a coffee bar." Brooke smirked without looking up. "Not wasting. Character building." The edge in her voice did more damage than any insult. "I'm paying my tuition," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "And my rent." My father shrugged. "Degrees don't pay bills, Anna Rose. Numbers do. Remember that." I wanted to tell him that I understood numbers better than anyone at that table, that I was literally building systems around them. But he had already turned back to Brooke. After that, I stopped trying to enter their conversations. I just started observing. Quietly. Carefully. Like collecting data. There were a few moments I thought things might finally shift. When I won a national research grant, I forwarded them the email and the press clipping. 6 hours later my mother replied, "So proud of you, sweetheart. We have a gala tonight. Maybe we can post about it tomorrow." They never posted. They never mentioned it again. That was the day something settled inside me. In this family, attention was currency. And I was always the unpaid intern in their empire. 2 days before graduation, a message popped up in the family group chat. Reservation link. Pre-graduation dinner for Anna Rose. Dress appropriately. No heart, no exclamation mark. Just instructions. I clicked the link out of habit. The host greeting at the top said, "The Hale family, Richard, Lillian, and Brooke." My name wasn't listed anywhere. That wasn't a typo. That was a statement. An hour later, Brooke texted separately. "Don't overthink it. It's just formatting." Formatting. That was how they saw me. A line. Optional. Removable. That night I sat at my desk, the city lights of Chicago flickering against my apartment window. My email was full of congratulations from classmates, professors, and a few investors. On screen, I mattered. At home, I didn't. I scrolled through old family photos on my phone. Fundraisers. Holidays. Vacations. My mother always centered, my father perfectly composed beside her, Brooke angled to catch the best light. Me, somewhere at the edge of the frame. Half lit. Half noticed. It wasn't new. It was just the first time I saw it with no leftover hope. The next morning, an email arrived from the university. "Your commencement address has been approved. You'll receive the Young Innovator in Technology Award." My mentor, Dr. Klein, had nominated me. She added one line at the end. "This is your moment, Anna Rose. Own it quietly." Quietly. That word felt right. My life was not loud. It was precise. On my desk, my coffee mug sat aligned with my notebook. Papers sorted by color. Sticky notes stacked in clean rows. The more I looked, the more I realized something important: my life was not out of control. It just wasn't controlled by them anymore. Months before that dinner, I had already been building something far away from their spotlight. It started as a project called Route Lattice, a routing platform for smaller logistics companies. Nothing glamorous. No viral app. Just clean math that cut wasted fuel costs. Leo handled analytics. Priya worked on the interface. And me, the barista with the part-time MBA, wrote the core algorithm at 2 a.m. with cold coffee and sore hands. One early morning, I ran a simulation and watched operating costs drop by 12%. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the numbers. Solid. Verified. Repeatable. Proof. By the time the university startup showcase came around, we were ready. Backstage, Dr. Klein touched my shoulder. "You don't need to sell yourself," she said. "Just show them what it does. Let the data talk." So I did. When the demo ended, the applause started polite, then shifted into something more real. People leaned forward. Took photos of the graphs. Asked for follow-ups. Among them stood a man in a charcoal suit I didn't recognize. Daniel Ward, CEO of Meridian Freight Systems. "You've built something disciplined," he said afterward, looking at the monitor. "And more importantly, something fair." Fair. I hadn't heard that word applied to anything in my life for a long time. We met twice after that. At our third meeting, he slid a folder across the table, the way my mother would later slide that white envelope. Only this one held an offer. Meridian wanted to acquire Route Lattice, keep the product alive, and bring me in as Director of Data Operations after graduation. The number on the page made my palms go cold: 6.2 million plus salary and equity. I didn't sign immediately. I read every clause twice, highlighted small lines that most people ignore, asked questions until I ran out of questions. I wanted control, not another imbalance with my name on it. When I finally signed, I didn't feel shock. I felt alignment. From that day, I kept records of everything. Digital copies. Timestamps. Contracts. Transfer confirmations. All encrypted and backed up twice. If my family loved paperwork so much, I was finally speaking their language. I just didn't intend to present it at their table. The night the final transfer hit my account, my printer spat out the confirmation letter from Meridian. The sound of that single sheet sliding onto the tray was cleaner than applause. I placed it in a folder and laid it on my desk, right next to a faded birthday card my mother gave me when I was 10. To my little dreamer, she had written. I slipped the acquisition letter under it. Same name. Two very different stories. Later that night, I opened the family group chat for the first time in months. The last message was from my mother. A photo of Brooke at a law firm gala, captioned, "Proud doesn't begin to cover it." I typed one reply. "I'll be at the graduation dinner." Nothing more. No explanation. No pictures. No plea to be seen. I cleaned my apartment the way I always did before anything important. Surfaces wiped, cables tucked, documents stacked by category. When everything finally felt in order, I stood in the middle of that small, quiet space and realized something simple. They thought the dinner would be about control. They had no idea I was coming with proof. The next evening, Chicago streets were still wet from another afternoon storm. The sidewalks reflected headlights and street lamps like it was all one long mirror. I got dressed the same way I'd prepared my documents. Deliberately. Simple blazer. Neat hair. Neutral tones. Not a costume for them. A uniform for me. Someone who belonged in boardrooms. And labs and anywhere that required a steady hand. When I reached Rue Lumiere, the front windows glowed yellow. I could already see the outline of my mother's careful posture and Brooke's head tilted down at her phone, ready to film whatever made her look good. The hostess glanced at the reservation list. "Hail party?" she asked. I watched her eyes flick over the names. "Richard, Lillian, and Brooke," she read aloud before catching herself. "And, guest." I smiled once. "I'm the guest." She led me to the back where the chandeliers hung lower, casting soft halos over polished glasses. My mother waved like this was a family reunion. "Anna Rose, darling," she called out, voice honeyed and bright. "We have something very special for you." A server appeared, placing a thick white envelope in front of my plate. No card. No name. Just wait. My father cleared his throat with that practiced authority I'd heard in every serious talk growing up. "It's time we all move forward," he said. My mother nodded, folding her napkin in her lap just so. "From all of us," she added. Brooke raised her phone slightly, framing the moment. She really thought she was about to record my humiliation. I slid my thumb under the flap and opened the envelope. Heavy paper. Legal header. Cold, dense language. They weren't being poetic about how I'd grown away from the family. They weren't giving me distance. They were formally severing ties. Signing away all familial obligations. My parents' signatures. Brooke's initials. A printed declaration that I no longer belonged to them. For a brief second, I saw myself years ago at that same table, waiting for a kind word, for a sliver of recognition. That girl was gone. I folded the letter in half. Then in half again. I placed it beside my spoon like it was just another piece of paperwork to file later. "Thank you," I said. All three of them blinked, as if they'd misheard. "You're thanking us?" Brooke asked slowly, doubt slipping into her voice for the first time all evening. "Yes," I said. "You finally put in writing what you've been acting out for years. It's clean. I like clean." My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hand hovered over her wine glass, unsure whether to sip, put it down, or use it as a prop. Before they could choose a script. I reached into my bag and pulled out my own folder. Same muted gray as the one Daniel had used. I set it gently in the center of the table and flipped it open toward them. "Since we're exchanging documents," I said quietly, "here's mine." On the first page, the Meriden Freight Systems letterhead glowed under the chandelier. Below it, clear black text, Route Lattice Acquisition Agreement. Director of Data Operations, Anna Rose Hale. Projected valuation. Total amount. Roll. Integration responsibilities. My mother squinted at the numbers. Brooke read faster, lips moving as she followed the lines. My father's frown deepened with each sentence. You sold it? He asked finally. I built it. Then I sold it, I answered. On my terms. You negotiated this alone? My mother said, voice thinner now. Not alone, I said. With people who actually wanted me in the room. Brooke dropped her phone onto the table, the camera pointed nowhere. For the first time in my life, she looked off balance. Off script. You didn't tell us, she said. I held her gaze. You didn't ask, I answered. Silence settled over the table like dust. Heavy. Unavoidable. They had handed me a letter that said I was nothing to them. I had handed them irrefutable proof that I was someone without them. I slid their disownment letter back across the linen. You can keep this, I said. It fits better with your records than with mine. Then I closed my folder, tucked it back into my bag, and pushed my chair away from the table. My mother reached out as if to catch my sleeve. Anna rose. You don't have to walk out like this, she whispered. I'm not walking out, I said calmly. I'm just walking forward. Behind me, the string quartet switched songs without knowing they were providing the soundtrack to a quiet funeral. Not mine. Theirs. I didn't look back as I passed the host stand. The reflection in the glass doors showed 3 people still sitting under a chandelier, surrounded by shine and empty plates. They had wanted a dramatic scene. All they got was a woman leaving with both letters and zero regret. The air outside was colder than I expected. It smelled like rain and car exhaust and some strange version of freedom. I walked home instead of calling a ride. I needed the distance, the sound of my own footsteps. The rhythm of the city instead of the clink of crystal. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky over the lake had started to pale at the edges. Morning creeping in, quiet and stubborn. I set my bag on the counter and pulled both envelopes out. The first one, from Meridian, I placed next to my framed degree. The second, the disownment letter, I set beside it. Side by side, they looked almost ridiculous. One document tried to erase me. The other proved they never had that power. I poured myself coffee, the familiar click of the mug against the table sounding louder than anything from that restaurant. I didn't reread their letter. I didn't need to. I already knew every line by heart, not because I cared what it said, but because I knew what it unlocked. I didn't owe these people any more explaining, proving, or begging. My phone buzzed once. A message from Brooke. We didn't mean it like that. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over the screen. Years ago I would have written paragraphs. Defended myself. Tried to translate my feelings into something they'd finally respect. Now, I simply flipped the phone over, screen face down. Not out of pettiness. Out of clarity. Some messages aren't invitations. They're echoes. I picked up their disownment letter, folded it neatly, and slid it behind my degree in the frame. Not hidden out of shame. Catalogued. Filed. Put in its proper place. Evidence of what was. Proof of what changed. Sunlight crawled slowly across the desk, catching the edge of the glass. Outside, Chicago woke up. Delivery trucks. Runners on the lakefront. A train shrieking on the tracks a few blocks away. In the window's reflection I saw someone I recognized, maybe for the first time. A woman alone in a room that finally, completely, belonged to her. People think revenge always sounds like shouting, like slammed doors, like viral confrontations. That morning, it sounded like a spoon stirring coffee in a quiet kitchen. My parents can tell people whatever they want. That I was ungrateful. Dramatic. Difficult. They can wrap the story in whatever language makes them feel less like the villains in their own narrative. But the paper trail doesn't lie. Their letter lives behind my degree. My acquisition letter lives in front of it. And my life keeps moving forward either way. They erased me from their family script. What they didn't realize is this: I became the footnote they'll never scrub out. The one line that proves the truth, every time someone asks where I went. If you've ever been the quiet one at the table, the one introduced last, the one everyone thought they could push to the edge of the frame, remember this: silence is not always surrender. Sometimes it is strategy. Sometimes it is the space you clear so you can finally hear yourself think. And once you hear your own voice clearly, you don't go back.